The story begins with a team of explorers who are in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. On that ship, there was a weather officer named David who reported on the weather conditions. They were heading towards an island that was located right in the middle of the ocean. The government had sent David there so that he could observe the changing weather of that island. David had to stay there for about a year to collect weather data. After collecting weather data for the whole year, he was supposed to return. David was given a year's worth of food and all the necessary supplies. After several days of travel, they finally reached the island. They used a board to get onto the island. This island was completely deserted, not even a single bird could be seen. There was a lighthouse and a small house on the island where David was supposed to stay. Because before this, a weather officer named Robert used to live here. But now his duty period had ended. He had lived alone on that island for a year, collecting weather data. Now, David would stay here for a whole year to collect weather data in his place, and the former officer Robert would return with the ship. But when the whole team visited the house, they were shocked because there was no sign of any human being there. Inside the room, all of the former officer's belongings were scattered here and there. After that, Captain David thought that maybe someone could be in the lighthouse. Without wasting any time, Captain and David head towards the lighthouse, and there they all witness a strange sight. They see that the entire lighthouse is surrounded by sharp and pointed wooden stakes, as if someone had deliberately sealed it off, so that no one could go inside. After that, Captain and David knocked on the lighthouse gate several times, but there was no response from inside. Finally, they pushed the gate hard and went inside. Inside the lighthouse, they found a man named Gruner. When they asked Gruner about the old weather officer Robert, he replied that he had died. He went towards the sea but never came back again. Hearing Gruner's words, both David and the captain were shocked. After hearing all this, the captain said to David, "If you still want, you can come back with us." But David refused to go back. David thought that if he could provide the government with an accurate weather report of the island, he could earn a hefty sum. After that, the captain gave him a gun for his own protection and said to David, "This place doesn't seem safe to me. Take care of yourself." After that, they left him there and all of them went back. And now, they would return again after 1 year. After the captain left, David settled the house a bit and made it livable. At night, while feeling scared, he found a diary that belonged to the previous weather officer, Robert. That diary contained a lot of information about the island. The diary mentioned some things about a mysterious creature, but not everything was clear. Some things were incomplete. David read every line carefully. There were also sketches of some strange animals in that diary. David couldn't understand why he had drawn such pictures. Maybe he was lonely and did it just to pass the time. On one page of the diary, there was also a photo of the former officer's wife. David got tired of reading the diary and gradually fell asleep. The next morning, David started collecting weather data. But as soon as he reached the seashore, his steps came to a halt. He saw that some stones were arranged in a strange way among the rocks, and shells were placed between them. In that odd pattern, David thought maybe Gruner had done all this. Thinking this, he got back to his work. While working, when he looked towards the lighthouse through his binoculars, he saw another person with Gruner. But in the blink of an eye, that person disappeared. David tried to spot him again, but then he thought it was just his imagination. At night, while David was busy with his work, there was a knock at the door. He thought maybe it was Gruner. David called out his name, but there was no response. As David picked up a lamp and moved towards the door, he began to hear some strange sounds in his ears, sounds that were not human at all. And then he saw that a bizarre creature's hand was trying to reach inside from under the gate. It was not a human hand at all. Seeing this, the ground slipped from under David's feet. He immediately ran towards the basement and hid there. Within moments, that mysterious creature had entered the house. It was searching for David, sneaking around, and David started watching it through a small crack in the basement. Because of David's movement, the creature spotted him. After that, the creature rushed towards David to kill him and tried to grab him through the crack. So, to save himself, David immediately grabbed a knife and stabbed it in the creature's eye. The creature screamed and ran away, but it could come back at any time. And it was now confirmed in David's mind that what was written about the creature in the diary was true. Terrified, he couldn't sleep the entire night. The next morning, when David went outside the house, he saw some footprints in the sand. They definitely weren't human. The tracks led straight to the sea and disappeared there. Now David understood everything, why Gruner had put sharp wooden stakes all around the lighthouse. Now David realized that if I stay in this house, those creatures could kill me at any time. Terrified, David runs toward the lighthouse and shouts at Gruner, "Open the gate, let me in." But Gruner doesn't let him in and says, "You should have left with the ship." David returns disappointed. because Gruner didn't even want to see him near the lighthouse. He pours water on him and tells him to go away. Now he would have to do something on his own. He boarded up every single window of the house with wood. He surrounded the place with sharp wooden stakes on all sides and placed old papers and books outside the gate, then sprinkled oil on them, so that if the creature came back, he could scare it away with fire. But there was one thing David still didn't know, and he was about to find out tonight. Luckily, he found an old box inside the house. Inside that box was a gun and a lot of bullets. Seeing this, he felt a glimmer of hope for survival. As the sun began to set, fear started to grow in David's heart. In just a short while, darkness fell all around. David sat quietly in a corner of the house, holding the gun in his hand. His heart was pounding fast. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound. And when David peeked towards the sea from behind the window, it was as if the ground slipped from under his feet. He saw that not just one, but many of those same strange creatures were coming toward him through the water. Within moments, they all gathered and started trying to break down the door of the room. David immediately started firing bullets, and some of the creatures fell and died. David thought that after hearing the sound of gunfire, they would get scared and run away. But seeing their companions die only made them angrier. Then, following his plan, David set fire to the papers and old books kept outside the door. Seeing the fire, those creatures got scared and retreated back into the sea. But now that same fire had reached David's house. The door of the house caught fire and it slowly started to spread. Because the entire house was made of wood, David quickly wrapped himself in a sheet to save his life, got out, and hid behind a large rock near the lighthouse. While shooting at the creatures, David's hand was badly injured. Suddenly, it started raining heavily. The fire slowly began to die down. But even after a whole night of rain, by morning David couldn't save his house. The entire house had burned down to almost ashes. Now, if David wants to survive, he will have to take shelter in the lighthouse. He picked up his rifle, hid among the rocks near the lighthouse, and waited for Gruner to come out to fetch water. When Gruner came out of the lighthouse to fetch water, David quietly followed him. But just then, a strange creature that was near Gruner suddenly attacked David. But somehow, David managed to overpower it. That creature was Gruner's protector. When he was about to shoot it, Gruner immediately stopped David and said, "Stop, this is my pet." David didn't shoot, and taking advantage of the situation, he made a deal with Gruner. "If you want to keep this creature alive, then let me stay in the lighthouse, otherwise I'll kill it." After that, Gruner agreed, because David had plenty of food and gunpowder. Before evening, both of them took the remaining food and returned to the lighthouse. They both fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, the creature was quietly licking David's hand. When David woke up, he saw that his hand had completely healed because of the creature licking it. Seeing all this, David was astonished. Now David wanted to learn more about this creature from Krona and then reveal everything to the world, because this was nothing short of magic. David thought that if they revealed the secret of this creature to the world, both he and Krona would earn a lot of money and fame. But Krona didn't want any of that. He didn't want to leave this island at all. Krona had no one left in this world. For him, this island was perfect, where he considered himself a king and master of his own will. That's why he had written in many parts of the island, "Krona is the king here." But David couldn't understand how this strange creature became so attached to Krona, so Krona explained that once he had saved her life. She had accidentally gotten caught in his fishing net. At that time, this creature was small, and after a few days, she just stayed with Krona. She started obeying his every command. But Krona was a harsh man. He treated this creature very badly. Krona had physical relations with this creature every day. Krona said that once, this creature even attacked him. And in return, Krona punished her so severely that after that punishment, the creature began to see herself as Krona's slave. And by now, you all must have understood why that creature comes out of the sea every night. They all come so that they can rescue their companion from Krona and take her back. But Krona doesn't let that happen. Those creatures can't attack in daylight because the sunlight burns their skin. David no longer wanted to stay here. He wanted to escape from the island somehow. Anyway, evening was approaching and Krona told him to get ready with the gun because those creatures could attack at any moment. They got ready to turn on the lighthouse light. And soon after, a large number of creatures emerged from the sea. They kept moving towards the lighthouse. Krona kept firing at them continuously, but David was completely terrified. He started moving towards the inside of the lighthouse. Despite Krona telling him repeatedly, he just sat quietly in a corner, and after a while, David fainted. Krona fought these creatures alone the entire night. The next morning, Krona angrily splashed water on David's face to wake him up and said, "If you want to stay alive, you'll have to kill them. Otherwise, you'll be thrown out of the lighthouse. and you'll have to obey everything I say. Every day, you'll have to fetch water, do all the small and big chores of the lighthouse, and at night, you'll have to do guard duty with me as well." Now David had no other option, so he was forced to do all this. David started obeying Kroner in everything, but there was one thing he absolutely couldn't stand. It was that every night, the female creature was physically tortured in different ways. Both of them get ready for guard duty again, and once more, they bring the creature out from the sea. But today, David wasn't afraid. He started firing at the creature, but this time, Kroner wasn't doing anything. He locked David outside and shut the lighthouse gate, then quietly sat inside by himself, so that David could learn for himself how to fight these creatures. In this way, David spent the whole night fighting, and morning finally came. In the morning, Kroner saw that David was sitting outside the lighthouse gate covered in blood. Now he had learned how to fight these creatures. And so, time kept passing by like this. Nights were spent fighting these creatures, and during the day, he managed the lighthouse work for Kroner on this island. Now for him, it had become like a closed-off home. He was always thinking about when he would finally leave this place and breathe the air of freedom. Over time, David developed a strange sort of friendship with that female creature. David had started to feel bad for her now. Now he understood how hard it is to live alone after leaving your own people behind. Maybe that creature probably felt the same way too. David even gave that creature a name, Naris. The days kept passing like this, and then one day they noticed that the attacks from these creatures were gradually decreasing. David thinks that maybe they go somewhere else during the winter. Or maybe they realized that fighting these two wouldn't get them anything. But Kroner told him that this isn't the case at all. They will attack again. Now they are increasing their numbers. A few more days passed like this. One night after dinner, Kroner and David started playing chess to pass the time. But right then, Kroner made a big mistake. They both got so caught up in the game that they completely forgot to turn on the lighthouse light. Taking advantage of the darkness, the creatures attacked them. David saw that there were so many creatures that even the two of them together couldn't fight them off for long. And this time, they didn't have any plan either. They were almost out of bullets as well. Somehow, dodging and escaping, they managed to reach the top of the lighthouse. But in the meantime, Kroner's leg was badly injured. The creatures had really overpowered them that night. Both of them felt certain that they were going to die that day. But fortunately, morning arrived. As the sun slowly began to rise, the creatures left the lighthouse and returned to the sea. After the blazing sun came out, Anarias tries to tend to Kroner's wounds. But by now, David had realized that they couldn't win this fight against the creatures. They were also running out of bullets. They didn't even have enough food to last much longer, luckily. The next day, while David was wandering around outside the lighthouse, he spotted a ship in the sea. He quickly went inside to get the flare gun and went to signal the ship. But Kroner stopped him, because he didn't want David to leave this place. At that very moment, Anaria attacked Kroner. She wanted to save David from Kroner. Kroner didn't want to let anyone leave this island. This island was his own world where he lived like a king. He didn't want to let David go either. After being alone for so long, he finally had someone he could talk to. And if David went back to that shape, then he would go there and tell everyone about Arius and him. That's why David can't leave here now. Slowly, that shape disappeared into the sea before David's eyes. Now he had nothing left to do. A few more days passed like this. Kroner was still treating both David and Naris badly. But he especially used to beat Naris, which David didn't like at all. One day David gave Naris a small tie pin as a gift, which he had made from a fish bone. But when Naris saw that pin, she took David to a corner of the island where there was actually a real boat. When David asked Kroner about this boat, he said yes. He already knew that there was a boat in this part of the island. Kroner says that some people came to this island to save their lives using the boat. But before morning, none of them survived. All of them were killed by these creatures. They were all carrying ammunition on the ship. But because of a storm at sea, their ship sank near this island. As soon as David heard all this, an idea came to his mind. They had something like a diving suit. David said that if either of us wears that suit and goes to the part of the sea where the ship sank, then maybe we could find some bullets or dynamite which would make it easier to fight these creatures. But Kroner refused to agree to this. But David was ready to risk his life to do this. A few more days passed like this. A deep connection developed between David and Naris. David started to like her. Kroner secretly saw the two of them romancing each other. Kroner felt that Naris would be taken away from him, so he would have to get David out of the way. The next day, Kroner himself agrees to David's proposal. He says to David, "Alright, you will put on the suit, go down into the water, and collect a lot of RDX there. Then I will pull you up from the board." But Kroner's real intention was something else entirely. He wanted David to help him bring the boxes of dynamite from under the sea back to the surface, and then leave him alone in the ocean so that the creatures would kill him. This way, he would get the dynamite and Anaria would become his slave again. The two of them sat in the boat and reached the spot where the ship had sunk. David put on the diving suit and went down into the sea. After going down, David saw that the ship was completely destroyed. But he was lucky enough to find some boxes of dynamite. But then suddenly, some creatures appeared in front of him. Seeing the creatures, David panicked and fell down. The diving suit was so heavy that he couldn't even move, and David couldn't send a signal to Kroner above either. Kroner thought that maybe the creatures had killed David, but in reality, they were just two small children. Somehow, David managed to leave his diving suit there and made his way up to the surface. There they found some old boxes that contained dynamite. After that, both of them got to work. They laid dynamite around the lighthouse in 2 layers so that when the next attack happened, they could eliminate the masters in one go. A few months passed and the snow season arrived, but once again, the creatures disappeared. Suddenly, such attacks had stopped, as if the creatures had found out that a trap had been set for them. That's why they were no longer attacking. Kroner thought that perhaps Naris had warned those creatures. Because of this, he started tormenting Anaria. But David stopped him. In the end, the two of them came up with a new plan together. They decided to leave the main gate of the lighthouse open so that as soon as the creatures came close, they could blow them all up with dynamite. David cleverly told Naris to scream from the top of the lighthouse. As soon as the creatures heard Annalise's voice, they became furious. When the creatures saw that the main gate of the lighthouse was open, they thought it was a good opportunity to rescue Naria, but in reality, it was a trap for them. Within moments, the creatures began to emerge from the sea. They headed straight for the main gate and, as soon as they entered, attacked David. David also shows courage and manages to free himself from the creature. As soon as all the creatures reach the lighthouse, Kroner pulls the dynamite lever, but the blast doesn't happen. Actually, David had disconnected it and Kroner forgot to reconnect it. David immediately runs upstairs and starts connecting the dynamite wire. By then, the creatures are trying to climb the lighthouse and only Kroner is holding them back. As soon as the connection is complete, David detonates the first layer, killing many creatures in the blast. But there are still plenty of masters ready to attack the lighthouse. Because of this, Kroner detonates the second layer as well. Both of them are knocked unconscious by the powerful explosion. The next morning, when both of them regained consciousness, they saw that Arias was not there. Dead creatures were lying all around from the blast. Kroner was killing all those who had survived the blast but were badly injured. At that moment, David noticed a necklace hanging around the neck of one of them. Seeing that creature writhing in pain, David feels pity for it and realizes his mistake. The creatures he had always thought of as ferocious were actually just like humans, only unable to speak. But for Kroner, all this was meaningless. After that day, those creatures were never able to attack again. But every day, the sound of crying could be heard from the seashore. David still didn't realize how much damage they had caused, how many families were torn apart, how many children lost their loved ones, all because of a single misunderstanding. The next day, David saw some small children of those creatures in the sea, those who had lost their families. David made a round circle of stones and placed that small tie board in the middle, so that Anaris would see it and come back. David waited for hours, but even Anaris did not return. After waking up in the morning, David saw that Kroner was sleeping. Kroner had kept some old things with him. Among them was an old photograph, and as soon as David saw that photo, he was shocked. It was the girl whose photo he had seen on the first day in the old Officer Robert's diary. She was none other than Kroner's wife, and in the photo, Kroner was standing with her. In reality, the weather officer Robert, who had come a year ago, didn't die. Instead, he changed his identity. In other words, Kroner himself is Weather Officer Robert. He had just changed his name because now he never wanted to leave this island. Seeing all this, David also gave up hope that he would ever be able to leave this island. The next evening, when David went to the seashore, he saw that the small boat kept inside the circle was no longer there. But at that very spot, he saw a small child of one of the creatures who was holding the boat in its hands. David threw the burning stick he was holding into the middle of the circle to show that he had no intention of fighting and so that no one would feel threatened by him. He wanted to befriend them. A short while later, Naris emerges from the waves of the sea, and behind her, the entire group of creatures also comes out of the water. But this time, no one attacks David because they also want peace now. Their only intention was to find a safe place for their children. But just then, Kroner arrives there holding a gun. Kroner thinks that if there is peace, how will he feel like he's on top? David tries to explain to him that these creatures don't want to fight, they want peace, but Kroner doesn't listen to anyone. He shouts at Arias, telling her to go inside. But for the first time, Arias didn't obey him because now she was no longer his servant. Seeing this, Kroner feels that his word no longer holds any value on this island. Kroner starts to feel weak from within, because now no one was obeying his orders anymore. In anger, he marched towards the lighthouse. David thought that maybe now Kroner had understood that every creature desires freedom. No one wants to live as someone else's slave. But the obsession with being king was not going to leave Kroner so easily. As soon as he reached the lighthouse, he fired a flare from the signal gun, which went straight and hit a creature's child. The child died instantly. All the creatures ran away in fear, and Naris also completely lost trust in David. Driven mad with anger, David immediately runs toward the lighthouse. To teach Kroner a lesson, David starts fighting him. Why did you do all this? These people just wanted peace. But Kroner had become so violent that he decided to kill David. As he was about to attack David with an iron rod in his hand, David called him by his real name and said, "Stop, Robert, you are not a killer." Hearing this, Kroner stopped immediately. In reality, Robert was never that kind of person. After coming to this island and living alone, his mental health had deteriorated. Loneliness, the death of his wife, and deep depression, these things had turned him into this. He was not actually a killer. He was a good person who realized that these creatures never wanted to fight, they just wanted peace. Kroner killed them only to make himself look powerful. And now Kroner had realized his mistake. That's why he surrendered himself to those creatures, and within moments, they killed him. David locks himself inside the lighthouse. Time keeps passing like this, and after a year, a government official arrives on the island along with a new weather officer. Now, the new government officer had to perform weather monitoring duties on this island. When the captain asked David about the previous officer, David gives the same answer, that he went towards the water but never came back. The weather officer also thinks that David is actually Grover. David didn't correct their misunderstanding either. He quietly went to the balcony and stood there, without saying anything, because now he too didn't want to leave this island. Just like Kroner. Meanwhile, Annalise was also happy with her family. Now they no longer feared a man like Kroner anymore. Now they could live freely both on the island and in the sea. With this, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to subscribe to our channel.